5.
Curry hits a three.
4.
Houston with a drive. Deep left field.
3.
Patrick hit by Watt. Sack number 10.
2.
Messi with a record-breaking goal.
1.
Welcome to BSS Sports. Now, here are your hosts, Steve, and Trevor.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of BSS Sports. My name is Steve Schill with the ever-lovely Trevor Struthers. And speaking about love, the Pride Week, Adam Silver and Jason Collins repping the Pride tour bus for the NBA. What a show that was. Man, what an interesting week in sports. NBA, the offseason, oh boys. So I guess to start off, the Chicago Bulls went from, yeah, we're not in a rebuilding year, to, yep, we're in a rebuilding year, just so everybody knows. They traded Jimmy Butler and the number 16th pick in this year's draft, which was Justin Patton, to the Minnesota Timberwolves, who's got the main man, Andrew Canadian Wiggins. And Minnesota sent over Zach LaVine, if you remember the slam dunk guy, a guard in the name of Chris Dunn, and the number 7th pick, who was Lauri Markkanen, and apparently from some sources that I've been talking to, because, you know, we got all sources up here in BSS Sports, is that guy should have been a lottery pick and not picked number 7th overall. Trevor, do you think that Chicago was ever going to pull this off? Like, I mean, it's a decent return. Jimmy Butler is coming off a pretty serious injury. Or, sorry, not Jimmy Butler, Zach LaVine. But if you look around the league, who else would he have gone? You think the Raptors could have given up something similar? I mean, the Timberwolves are younger, so I guess they have some extra prospects to give away. But, I mean, the Bulls, this is kind of shocking.
Yeah, well, from the prospect perspective, it makes all the sense in the world, obviously. Yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, the Timberwolves probably have a tremendous amount of prospects and, you know, even a decent draft pick that they would be able to give up in a potential trade. But, I mean, yeah, when you look at, you know, somewhere that Jimmy Butler would end up landing, we were looking at kind of like maybe not necessarily a Toronto, but somebody that was like somebody that was trying to compete, maybe even like a Cleveland or, you know, Boston, you know, teams that were like definite playoff teams that were trying to make that push. And definitely in the East, it came from the perspective of we can, you know, bring this guy in to kind of help push us over the top to maybe beat a Cleveland. And so, yeah, from that perspective, it's incredibly surprising. But it's also because, I mean, apparently, I guess the Timberwolves are now going to decide that, you know, we have a lot of these young players, obviously, still, and a lot of talent. And now we're going to start to push and see what we can actually turn this team into. Obviously, this is a huge part of it, is not only drafting and developing some of these young guys, but bringing in those support pieces, and they have a big one now. And, I mean, obviously that Western Conference is a tough conference to find success in. And so now next year, maybe this team could find themselves in a playoff spot potentially, and that's a lot to ask. But, I mean, yeah, and for the Bulls on the other side of it, it does seem like they have decided that just looking around, they have Jimmy Butler and not much else. They didn't have much else going on for them, that this is maybe a time to kind of look to rebuild right now.
I mean, this kind of just solidifies the East is getting weaker and weaker by the day. Dwight Howard also on the move. That guy, man, he can't stay anywhere for very long. Going from Atlanta to the Hornets in a trade, apparently feeling motivated because he had a little phone conversation with Michael to the Jordan. So Dwight Howard and the number 31st overall pick was sent to Charlotte for Miles Plumlee, shooting guard Marco Bellinelli, who's formerly a Bull, and the 41st pick. For me, this is just kind of lackluster. I don't think there's much here. This just screams to me that Atlanta didn't want to have Dwight around anymore. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's different from the Butler scenario, whereas Butler, you're looking at, you know, a definite impact player. I don't think Howard's necessarily an impact player much anymore. He's very much a support player, and you need the players around him to kind of help do the work, because he's not a guy that you can rely on to get the job done, much like obviously you would with some of the better players in the game. I think that's what this comes down to. And yeah, I mean, Dwight Howard, he's just been bouncing around, and I don't know if it's behind the scenes, you know, reasons that he hasn't been able to stick somewhere for a long time, but he continues to bounce around, and he's not necessarily that great, you know, player that you can lean on. So I don't know exactly what this would mean for the Hornets moving forward. They just got themselves a really tall center that could grab rebounds, but not do much beyond that.
So if you remember not too long ago, the big talk in Los Angeles was, we got to sign DeAndre Jordan, keep Lob City going, all this stuff. He's going to the Mavericks. Oh no, we're having a house party, this and that. Big kerfuffle. Now we got Blake Griffin, as well as Chris Paul, opting out of their contracts. With that being said, sure, they could re-sign. But also, it's Lob City. Also, it's, hey, everybody, look, Clippers are the new Los Angeles. This is all going down the drain if they sign elsewhere. And I mean, for all intents and purposes, you think one of them is going to re-sign, but you got to think that there might be somewhere else that looks a bit more appealing for either of these players, especially if the other one is not there, because I guess you'd say the Clippers are more of kind of the big three, if you're looking at it that way. Trev, I guess the big question is, do you think that either of them are even going to re-sign with the Clippers?
It depends. I mean, are we going to have that same sort of situation with DeAndre Jordan? That was incredibly entertaining kind of television when you heard that, or even more so than television. I mean, in this day and age, it was a very interesting. It was a great Twitter feed to just pay attention to what was going on, all the updates. It was very different, and we definitely wouldn't have had anything like that about a decade, 15 years ago, something like that. So that was very, very strange. But I don't know if they would end up leaving the Clippers. Obviously, the thing to do in the NBA is to call up your good friend from the All-Star game and try to decide where they want to go and throw together 5 All-Stars and try to compete with Cleveland and Golden State. And so, I mean, obviously, the Clippers have never really had a bad team these last few years, but they're a team that we didn't even really consider having a shot to get over the hump this year with the likes of Golden State and San Antonio. So maybe they do look to go elsewhere. I mean, obviously Golden State probably won't be a landing spot, or Cleveland, because those teams are still kind of, full when it comes to talent and know that they can get the jobs done in their conferences. But if another team is looking at bringing guys in, even like maybe a Lakers, if Paul George is a name that we've heard connected to the Lakers, if they find a way to bring in some star players, obviously, the Lakers, that's quite the franchise to go and play for and trying to win a championship. And it's been a while since they've kind of been to those glory days of the Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal business.
So everybody talks about how you got to build your team around the draft, and with the NBA, obviously, because you have 5 people on a field at a time, the draft is very important, or if you splash money. Now, I found this blog post that was from a few years ago, but it's talking about how from certain draft classes, how many players played at least one game, and then how many of them got up to 410 games. So let's go back to 2005, 2006, 2007. In 2005, there was 60 players drafted. 24 of them played upwards of 400 games. Now, in 2006, there was 60 players drafted, and only 11 of those made it to 400 games. Now, I guess from this perspective, I mean, obviously things change over time, but you got to be very selective because only a few from the draft are going to make it. Usually within the top 15, you got a good shot. Top 5, more so, injuries play a part, etc., etc. But with that being said, the NBA draft always never lets you down. In this case, LeVar Ball taking the show yet again, and he's not even getting drafted. His son is. So, first overall pick, Philadelphia 76ers, trading things up with the Boston Celtics, which was technically the Brooklyn's first overall pick from the deal, which Boston kind of exploded, and Brooklyn tried to take everybody from Boston. When that happened, that did ever not work. But Markelle Fultz deciding that he was going to wear the 76ers cap, or I guess they decided he was going to wear it, and Philadelphia's got way too many rookies, and that's probably going to haunt them in the near future. Alonzo Ball going to the Lakers. A lot of people didn't really think that wasn't going to happen, so no shocking there, but LeVar Ball getting into the crowd, taking photos. What a friggin' character. Jason Tatum going to the Boston Celtics, which apparently was the guy the Boston Celtics wanted, so they didn't care about moving. Josh Jackson going to the Phoenix Suns. And then De'Aaron Fox with the cool hair going to the Sacramento Kings. And then Jonathan Isaac down to the Orlando Magic. And then we hit the weird pick that the Minnesota Timberwolves picked, the guy from Finland, Lauri Markkanen, which ended up getting traded to the Bulls. First international off the board in that sense. And then I guess we can talk about Toronto, because for I think about the 15th damn year, they've selected an international, but this time from the United Kingdom. And Trevor, what is his first name?
All I know is he's a real OG.
His name is OG. That probably stands for something, but for all intents and purposes, his name's OG.
It rhymes with his last name, too.
OG, I don't even know how to say that. So.
Ananobi. It's a fun name to say, OG Ananobi. And, I mean, from all intents and purposes, with what we know with OG, it's that he should be a phenomenal defender in years to come. I don't know how his offensive game will be, but, I mean, it sounds like it was a decent pick, but not one of those great picks where you're looking at maybe a future superstar. It's been like that with the Raptors over the case of the last few years as well, and a lot of that has had to do with, obviously, some success during the season. You don't get necessarily a great draft pick.
Well, the thing that's a little confusing, I guess you'd say, is the fact that we keep going internationally, but then these draft picks very rarely turn out. Like, especially this Bruno Abokalo guy. Like, is he going to come around, or is that just wishful thinking at this point?
Well, at least he's still hanging around, and I mean, obviously everybody, when it comes to worst Raptors draft picks, thinks of Andrea Bargnani, but hey, at least they were able to get rid of him eventually. And then, with Bruno, I mean, I think it's still a guy that's growing, and I mean, that's the thing with a lot of these players in general, is you just got to give them their time to grow. People develop, obviously, at their own speeds, and Bruno hasn't obviously been a bust yet, but we've still yet to see the big moments from Bruno Caboclo, but they could be ahead, and I mean, obviously, I think it's far from ruling out the final decision here on Bruno.
So, switching over to the NHL, because, we do more than just one sport here, because we're multi-talented. The Las Vegas Golden Knights. Yes, the NHL draft happened, but so did the expansion draft. And I have to say, I didn't think the team was going to look all right, but the team looks all right. Like, I mean, I'm not batting an eye at it type of deal, but, like, I mean, the goalie situation is pretty good. The defense looks pretty damn good as well. The forwards were 50-50, hit or miss. I guess now looking at this, is there any player that you're like, why would you take them?
Not necessarily. They really did have an opportunity to try to load up on goaltending. That's something they didn't do. They had a chance to get a Peter Mrazek out of Detroit because they protected Howard, and they stayed away from that. And obviously, I mean, a lot of that comes down to salary cap and finding roles for guys on teams. And speaking of which, I mean, you mentioned the defense that they took. 9 of those guys were on one-way contracts. So, I mean, this probably isn't yet the Vegas team that we're going to see take the ice. They have a lot of things to work with here in terms of trying to deal and get younger. It seems like Vegas, this is the smart approach. It's also the long-term approach. They don't want to be good necessarily yet. They want to maybe try to get rid of some of these better players and get younger and get good draft picks in the future. And I think that's the right way to go for really any kind of expansion team. You sort of have to build your foundation, and that's the way to go about doing it. But, I mean, yeah, for the most part, I mean, I'm watching that expansion draft, and for, like, the first few rounds, I'm thinking, okay, their best player in the entire franchise right now is James Neal, which, I mean, he's a top 6 forward, really, on almost any NHL team. I mean, he went to the Stanley Cup final with Nashville, but he's not really that star player. And then obviously they get Fleury there towards the end from Pittsburgh, which everybody pretty much saw coming. Yeah, I mean, Fleury is maybe a guy they could hold on to just because even if you're a horrible team, you almost want that good goaltender that could maybe get you a few wins and try to stand on his head. But out in front of him, I mean, yeah, some of those defense will probably be moving. And a guy that could move is Mark Mathot out of Ottawa was a guy that they got. And we already heard rumors that it could be the day after the expansion draft that he got flipped to, say, a Dallas or something like that. Montreal's been interested in him, but Mark Mathot has a moderate no trade, pardon me. So he's got like 12 teams on a list, and pretty much every Canadian team except for Ottawa is on that list. But the whole thing is apparently he can't go back to Ottawa until the turn of the calendar into 2018 as a part of the expansion rules. So Mark Mathot could end up somewhere, but I mean, almost half the teams in the league are off of that list, so that right there could make it difficult to move a guy. But there are some other guys on that team that you could very much see moving.
Flying through this episode of BSS Sports here on 91X, the NHL draft, the first 2 picks were something that were kind of a bit of a flip-flop, and it did flop, or flip, I guess, not flop. We don't know that part yet. But Nico Hischier going first overall to the New Jersey Devils. Now, Hischier was a fan of the New Jersey Devils, so I don't know if that that played a part into it, but from like NHL Central scouting rankings, they had Nolan Patrick, who did go second to the Philadelphia Flyers, going first overall. Trev, what do you think the Devils' thought behind this one was?
Well, really, it was a complete toss-up, and I mean, coming from a guy that is surrounded by the OHL, and for this past year, for the first time, really surrounded by the OJHL, a lot of these guys I didn't get to see too much of play, but apart from what I know, I mean, Nico Hischier and Nolan Patrick, it was really, it was very much, from what it sounded like on the broadcast too, one of those Taylor Hall, Tyler Seguin situations where you could take one, you could take the other. It should turn out fantastic unless you eventually trade him away like Boston did with Seguin. Yeah, I mean, it was really a 1A, 1B situation, and they decided to go with Hischier. And, I mean, I was asked just before the pick who I thought was going first, and just off of instincts, I thought it was going to be Hischier. And I think both of these players have a chance to really be top-line forwards in the NHL, and ultimately that's what it comes down to, and that's what matters most. And it wouldn't be a surprise. I mean, the big thing that I guess would have been surprising with the Taylor Hall, Tyler Seguin thing, going all the way back to that, is that the winger over the centerman went first, and usually you see that centerman kind of take that prominent role over the winger.
So that's it for this edition of BSS Sports, but let me tell you, next week we're going to cover more of the NHL Draft, because the NBA Draft, oh man, that took up a while, along with the trades and whatnot, but I mean, Jimmy Butler got traded, so I mean, you got to talk about it. You can check out all of our archived works on YouTube at BSS Productions. Make sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at BSS Sports. For Trevor, Struthers, and myself, Stephen Schill, we'll catch you next Monday.